Thank you.
That's why I have to turn it off.
Good evening. I would like to call the October 13th meeting of the SAU 41 Governing Board to order. This is the board that serves the SAU. It is comprised of the Hollis School Board, the Brookline School Board, and the Cooperative School Board. And we work with the management of the SAU board, for the SAU department. I would like to appoint a process observer. Anyone? Holly, you were it last time.
Oh, well, then I don't want to do it again.
Tom. Thank you.
You'll be sorry. You already are.
And agenda adjustments. I have one agenda adjustment that I would like to add onto discussion, the compensation committee, just a quick discussion. Are there any other agenda adjustments? Pardon me?
Kelly's listed as not attending on the thing, so we should probably note that she's,
Okay, good
Yeah.
point,
Yeah,
thank
there will
you.
be some changes to that, I think.
To the compensation
No
committee?
attendance.
No, to the people.
To the attendance?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kelly Zakar is here?
Zacher.
Zacher, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I
I
apologize.
emailed Dawn earlier, hoping that she would
Okay, so
have
she
the
didn't-
opportunity.
Okay, she will
to
have
travel.
that, and Kate Stoll will not be able to attend, but I think she emailed Dawn as well.
Send your name, violates
Okay, any other adjustments?
grammar as we were talking.
Okay, so we're gonna go to the approval of minutes. I would like a motion to approve as presented, the minutes from May 13th.
So moved.
So Carol and Cindy? I don't have any adjustments or any amendments. Does anyone else have any?
it says May 12th.
May 12th.
Am I reading the wrong thing?
The outline does
It
say
was
May
May,
12th.
it is May 12th, yes, thank you, okay. Anything? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Tom. And Tom. So 702. All right. Now I'd like a motion, if I could,
I abstain too. I
9.
abstain too.
for the,
Krista, he
Ken-
abstains
I
as well.
abstain too, sorry.
oh, I'm sorry,
I
Ken.
realized I wasn't here.
All right.
And I think it's
803.
803.
Yes.
Jeez. Hey, that's what you get when you're trying to do it in your head. All right, and now we have the non-public minutes with the, for May 12th, for the following amendments. Page 1, line 31, remove reference to Assistant Superintendent Bergskog being in attendance.
So moved.
Carol, second?
Second.
Cindy? Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstained? 3, so 803. All right, thank you. Now I need a motion. We're going to go into our public hearing. Well, it's not 6:15, so we're going to wait on that.
It was actually posted for 6, so we're okay.
Oh, it was,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we just didn't know how long it would take to get to it. Thought it'd be 10 or 15 minutes, but.
Okay.
Move it along.
So we can go, okay. So I need a motion that the board recess until the conclusion of the public hearing. May I get a motion?
I move that the board recess until the conclusion of the public hearing.
Second? Okay, thank you. All right. All those in favor? Okay. Opposed? Okay, thank you. All right. All right, the board
Pass it around.
recessed at 6:05. All right, hand this over to Mr. Corey.
Okay. In your board packet, the business office provided us with the fund balance. We're going to be discussing a couple different items tonight. One is the amount of salaries the board approved at their May meeting. second is, if you recall in May, I told the board I'd probably be coming back looking for some sort of adjustment to our hourly wage people. So we'll be talking about that, because that could impact the unreserved fund balance. And what's coming around is a document that is two-sided. And I'd like to start on the side that says SAU salary analysis for FY 23-24. If you look at the far left-hand column, you have the original salaries for your administration and your hourly support staff listed in that first column. In FY 23, in May, the board approved $33,806 worth of raises, and those are outlined in that column with the May increases. That $33,806 is board approved, and therefore is in the FY 23 budget. And then the next column is the resulting salaries that were approved based on those increases in May. So you have everybody at the SAU with their approved salary. And then we provided the percentage increase over the original budget. The next column is the mid-year increases that we'll be discussing in a couple minutes. So I'll just put those on hold. So you have your total salaries for FY 23 for those that were approved in May of FY 23 and the accompanying percentages. Some of the percentages, there are disparities because in some cases individuals are seeking a master's or a CAGS or something of that, and they were getting compensation provided through those programs. And therefore, their percentage might be a little lower. In some positions, we were very much in line with salaries across other SAUs, so we were very competitive there. And in some places, we had lost ground or were looking to maintain the staff that we had. The next column is the proposed salaries for FY 24. Those are based on primarily a 3.5% increase, but some individuals, because of the process that we were using to catch them up to regionally competitive, and I'll use the Director of Technology as an example, when we were able to move forward, I think it's 2 years ago with President Technology Director, we realized that we were significantly below market value. And we put forth a compensation package that would increase that salary over the 3 years. So when you look at that jump from the 97 to the 105 or 8% increase, that is because it contains a significant salary adjustment to get them into a competitive range. So when you see those bumps, that's where you're seeing them from, and what they're related to is getting them to catch up to
Could you give one of
their
those to
peers,
Tammy?
whether it be in SAUs or the competitive marketplace. So presently, the fund balance in FY 23 is $260,385. The board has already approved $33,807, and will discuss tonight $18,318, which would give us a total, if the second number of $18,318 were approved, of $52,125.
Andy, could you just could you tell us where that is in the packet, where these numbers are that you're reciting?
The number he mentioned is the one in the black box, that's the 33,806.
Yeah, no, but with where
Flip
the
it over.
impacts to the fund
The
balance.
fund balance.
The fund balance page.
It's in the board
It's
packet.
in the
It
packet.
looks like this.
Which page is that?
Page 5.
Yeah. Actually, page 6 on your PDF.
6.
Header is fund balance.
Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Page 6.
So, the 18,318 will be discussed later. The 33,807 is already approved. If the board were to approve both amounts, the total would be $52,125, and take the ending fund balance of $2,000 to $208,260, which falls in at 9.9%, which is on the high end of our target of 7 to 10%. There's a strong possibility right now, because of staffing issues, we just were able to fill our receptionist position, and we still have not been able to fill the Assistant Director of Special Services, that we may not need to go into the unreserved fund balance at all. When we were doing this, we were anticipating a full-time person being in what was formerly Amy's role. So that salary now is just sitting there unencumbered and can be used to offset salaries, or eventually would go down to the bottom line and become part of the unreserved fund balance. In looking at the proposed FY23 mid-year increases, there are two sides, and I'm going to turn over to the second side, which is more of the breakdown. As I've said in the past, it's often difficult to get direct comparisons, because not every district does things the exact same way or calls people the exact same staffing members. But Kelly was able to, as best she could, reach out to Milford, Wyndham, Bedford, Amherst, Oyster River, and Stratham and Bow did not respond. So what we're looking at is, and I'll use the third one down, the accounting specialist. We are presently at $23.50 for an annual compensation of $46,001.25. And you can see that in Milford, that same position is $25.10, Wyndham is $25, Bedford's $28.14, Amherst is $31.20, and Oyster River is $27.63. And this is basically the same issue that we're discussing at the district level regarding our hourly people. Those are the individuals who have not been able to catch up. We look at our HR specialist, presently making $19.67 an hour, $38,504.03 a year. And in Milford, we get 21, in Wyndham, 24.78, Bedford, 27.06, Amherst, 25.41, and Oyster River, 25.88. So when we look at what we are trying to do with the proposed $18,318, if you turn back to the front side of the sheet and you look at the mid-year increases column, so we would be adjusting the HR director by a total of $2,495. The senior business, the assistant business administrator by $2,495. The facilities director of $1,746. The student services administrative assistant by $673. The compliance communication specialist by $263. The HR specialist by $5,192. The accounting specialist of $2,525. The accounting specialist of $1,463, and the business office specialist of $1,463, and that's how we come up with the $18,318. We have presently had 2 staff members receive offers, and have offers, I would say, pending, but they know that we are looking at this tonight, and enjoy the environment they work in, but at some point, the differential may become too great for them to continue to stay. One of the things that Linda shared with our SAU Budget Committee subdivision and that I support is the amount of training that goes into these folks. And just probably about 4 or 5 months ago this summer, we had lost somebody who became a payroll specialist. She had been with us and we had trained her and was able to take that training in payroll and move over to a neighboring district for $60,000, which was a significant increase to her. And they provided a fully remote environment, which was the 2 pieces that she was looking for. So we are seeing this across the board with hourly compensation. On the back side of the sheet, if you turn it back over, we provide you on the left-hand column, the FY23 rate, what they're presently making. And then on the right-hand column, all the hourly people, we provide you their new rate. So using the, we'll use the HR specialist. She's going from $19.67 to $25, because that's kind of the standard pay. In terms of the facilities director, HR administrator, and assistant business administrator, those are not hourly people, but people who have been identified as being undercompensated. On Lance's position, I want to just identify, you'll see a discrepancy between this side of the sheet at 85,000 and the other side at 83. And it's just because the software Kelly uses, on the front side, that's just simply Excel, and she's able to do it by hand. On the back side, that assumes that he's getting the increase for both half of the year, and that's not correct. He's only getting the increase for one half of the year, so it's the correct number of 83,246 on the front side is exactly what he would be getting. I will share that I think the business office, where most of these people and human resources, which falls under Kelly, doing exceptional work and working extremely hard. I think, as we've all seen, it's become very, very difficult and very, very competitive in the hiring market to retain people. So as we eventually move out of the public hearing during the regular board meeting, I will again address the 18,318 and what I would recommend we do. But I wanted the public to know through this spreadsheet exactly what was approved in May, what we're looking at mid-year increases and for who, what those resulting percentages are for all individuals involved, and how do we utilize the fund balance. As I say, I don't anticipate at this point that we will use the entire 52,125, and there's a potential that we won't use any of it because of open positions at this time. And I would take any questions from the board on the fund balance public hearing part.
Tom?
Two questions, Andy. First, a simple one on the, I don't know if you're calling it page 1 or 2, but with the salary analysis. The far right column, percent increase from final FY23 salaries, is by final FY23, is that based on assuming the mid-year increase?
If they are getting a mid-year increase, then it's compounded into next year's salary as well.
But I guess my point is, when it's an increase, it's not an increase relative to the first column necessarily.
Correct. Like if you looked at mine,
It's going to be on a total FY23, assuming the mid-year increases go through.
that's correct.
Okay, that's
That's
good.
correct.
So that total is correct, even if that left-hand column is incorrect, is that right? Is that what you're asking, Tom?
No, what I'm saying is, if the proposed mid-year increases
Right,
were not approved,
yes.
but the proposed FY24 salaries were approved, the jump, it's a different number. I'm just trying to figure out where the math is.
Percentage.
Correct.
Right.
Okay.
got it.
The other question I have, and it's maybe a little bigger deal. You said you've got open positions. Either we need those positions or we don't. If we don't, we're going to have questions of why do we even have them if we can get by without them? If we do need them, what do we need to do to fill them? Because to say we need them but not take the steps to fill them seems inconsistent. And to run the district successfully without those positions filled brings in the question of, do we need them?
Right. And when we go into the board meeting again, I'm going to touch upon our going out to an agency for the receptionist, and then the steps we've needed to take across the SAU to address not having an out-of-district person, because it's definitely something that is making life difficult. But at the same time, Lauren has put together what I'll call a short-term plan so that we can function. And so some of the funds that we have allocated to Amy will be expended on a basis of assigning specific duties and pieces that must be done to individuals who have the skill set that already work for us.
I guess where I'm going with it from a budget standpoint is, if we need to fill those positions, I question the validity of saying that we won't need the money, because my guess is that if we're not able to fill them in part because of our pay scale, we'll need everything we've got and then some.
Well, maybe I should rephrase it. If we are unable to fill the position, the money from the position will be utilized to farm piecemeal work out to qualified individuals, as well as to address salary areas. If you look at right now, the Assistant Director of Student Services, the total salary approved was $90,000, okay? And we're looking at $93,150 for next year, okay? That's a very competitive salary, but for a position where very few qualified people exist. So we did interview probably a handful of what I would say qualified people, and for whatever reasons they chose, they decided not to come. And I'll use one example. One of the districts that we thought we were going to be hiring somebody from was able to take their ESSER COVID money and offer that individual a retention bonus to stay. So I think, you know, in my opinion, if we get out in January, February, we'll see a larger pool. And there's also a greater sense of comfort with people moving districts now that we're through. Hopefully the worst of COVID. I mean, it's not over, but hopefully, you know, we're making progress and people feel more comfortable about going to different locations. But I can tell you a number of people felt very much inclined to stay put. There's been enough change in their life that they didn't want to take another position with everything that had gone on.
Andy, if I may comment on Tom's question. First time I ever heard Amy Rose say anything in public was in a presentation to the Hollis Budget Committee. And she was asked exactly that same question by the chair at the time. And her answer was, we can handle this situation for the time being, but if we don't adjust to it, she was looking for a position, an increase in a number of positions. If we don't adjust to it for the following fiscal year, we will end up being out of compliance. And, you know, it was, her answer had more detail to it, but I recall that's how she explained a similar situation. It was compelling then and compelling now.
And you know, the budget subcommittee had a conversation, a couple of them, about this, and the situation that our SAU office is in right now in covering these things, and it does boil down to compliance. It's unsustainable. So while we can piecemeal stuff together right now, it has to, it is a required position, and it is something that's necessary. I'm kind of addressing what you were asking, is it something that we can make do without? Well, under duress for a short period of time, but going forward, it's unsustainable.
But is the proposed FY24 salaries large enough to fill those vacancies?
That's the million-dollar question, I think, on all of them, right?
Multi-million.
That's why we're talking about it.
I believe the salary will attract qualified candidates. If the exact dollar amount isn't enough, the board has always provided the flexibility to make sure we get the right candidate. But that dollar amount of the 93 is going to get people in the door. And it is an attract.
There are other positions that are unfilled, aren't there?
Just
We
one.
had the receptionist unfilled, that was it, and that's been filled.
Okay.
So we're down one body at the SAU.
I'm sorry,
again-
I thought there were multiples.
Well, we just
In the
filled the
districts.
receptionist
Tuesday.
on Tuesday.
Andy, excuse me, did you fill it with a temp agency or the straight hire?
So we had to use, we ended up doing the direct hire, but we used a temp agency to find
Oh.
the candidate.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna,
I have
go
one,
ahead,
but
Ken.
I don't know if it's for this or later. I was just asking Karen, when we brought on the Assistant Director of Student Services, I thought that was a transitionary thing for a time being, and I don't know that we ever talked about it being in perpetuity or not. And I'm just trying to remember if my memory is correct or not, but I know there was a transition phase, and that was why I thought we had created this position, but we previously didn't have it. Is that
We have it.
accurate or not? It's not accurate.
It's incorrect.
Okay.
We,
So
We-
what was it then?
we've always had the Assistant Director of Student Services since I've been here.
Okay,
At one point, we transitioned to reduced hours to accommodate an individual schedule.
okay,
And whether it had been Assistant Superintendent Thompson or Lauren, who's presently in the role, they picked up some of the other duties to facilitate that individual. Now we're at the point where we have moved back to the traditional roles where the Assistant Director of Student Services' primary responsibility is students who are out of district. So these are our most significant children, most times our most significant costs, and you are constantly in communication with a variety of agencies to make sure the required services. Some of these children are full-time residential, some of the children are full-day programs. So it's a very complex, smaller group, but very intense.
Andy, if I could just
thank you.
clarify, we had one year when Principal Thompson transitioned to the director position, we created a temporary consulting position.
Maybe that's what I
For
remember,
one
right.
year.
Yeah.
Then the following year, the assistant director left, and the person who had been the consultant filled the role of the assistant.
Got it.
Does that help?
That's very helpful. Thank you for the background, and I think
Sorry,
that's,
I remember the McKendon, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah, no.
thank you.
Good. Any other questions? Okay, before we go into public input for this, I just want a little housekeeping for Dawn. Tammy arrived at 6:06 and Rob arrived at 6:09. Okay, I am going to open up the floor for public input. I ask that you keep your comments to 2 minutes, and it's open.
Do we need to provide this to the public if they want to know?
This particular member of the public would have it.
Part of the budget committee. Hi,
You're right.
go ahead.
Hi, Brian Rader, Brookline, also on the SAU Budget Committee. I'll try to be really brief. First of all, I'm very glad that, I fully understand the depth of the situation that the SAU found itself in, and I'm very glad that this board took action when you did to try to address that. I can see the frustration that's happening in the SAU with it. However, I very strongly disagree with using the retained fund balance to pay for long-term salary increases. I think in the future, if you were going to do this, I would strongly encourage you to consider one-time retention bonuses, perhaps even with half of it in front and half at the end of the year or something. But this feels like, and I can certainly understand this from the perspective of a common voter out there, that it feels like the SAU board just simply expanded its own budget using the retention fund, which the retention fund has been talked about endlessly as being a contingency fund. This particularly struck me because, like, the night before, we were in the co-op budget committee, which I'm on, and we were discussing the co-op retention fund for it and saying how this is very rarely used, it's only used in extreme emergencies. And then the very next morning, I find out that the SAU board has decided to expand salaries, which turned out to be for a very good reason, and is using the retention fund to pay for those salaries. And that seems like a bridge too far, I think. I would just strongly encourage you, if you run into the situation in the future, and hopefully we never will, to use one-time retention bonuses instead of the salary adjustments, and allow the salary adjustments to be done through the regular budget approved by the voters in March. I think the requests that have been made in it is very reasonable for it. I just feel like this feels like it's a little bit outside of the process more than it should be.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any other public input? Okay, I am closing public input at 6:31. And I am closing the public hearing at 6:31. And we are moving back into our meeting. Thank you. Right. We are moving on to, oh look, public input. I'm opening public input at 6:31, and I ask that you keep your comments to 2 minutes.
Hi again, I'm still Brian Rader.
It's good to know,
Changed in like 2 seconds.
thankfully.
So beyond the retention funds, I am very much feeling a certain level of more than stress, getting to the point of burnout among some of the staff at the SAU. And I'm very concerned about that. And this happens, you know, I've seen this happen before where we've got a certain amount of work and then for economic reasons, right now unemployment's almost non-existent. It's really hard to keep people. But you've got fewer and fewer people trying to do the same or sometimes more work, and that really burns people out. There are 2 ways you can address it. One is you can hire more people, which is really tough in this environment where our unemployment's just as low as it is right now. The other option, which I would encourage you, and maybe you're already doing, but I would really want to encourage you to look at, is look at the things that they're doing and what are things that, and try to identify things that take up hopefully significant amounts of time, but even insignificant, small amounts of time that can be held off for a couple of years until the employment environment's a little bit more friendly for it. So we really do need to take a close look at what are all the different services that they're providing, and is there a way that we can scale that back just to keep people from getting burned out? I'm very concerned about that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Brian. Is there any other public input? If not, I am closing public input at 6:33, which means, Brian, you spoke for exactly 2 minutes. Thanks for listening to me. Okay, we are moving on to the presentation for the FY 2024 draft budget by Superintendent Corey.
In your board packet, we had provided you, first of all, with the budget subcommittee members. So I'd just like to run through that so the public is aware of it. I serve on the committee along with Gina, Kelly Seeley, our business manager, and Linda Sherwood, our senior assistant business administrator. From Brookline, we have Allison Marzano representing the Brookline School Board, and Brian Rader from the Brookline Finance Committee. From Hollis, we have Carol Roy representing the Hollis School Board, and Michael Harris from the Hollis Budget Committee. From the Co-op School Board, we have Krista Whalen, and from the Co-op Budget Committee, we have Darlene Mann. So that makes up our membership. There are a couple pieces of information that I want to provide just because they weren't available at the printing of the board packet. And first is our GMR. That is a guaranteed maximum rate for health insurance has come out. And that guaranteed maximum rate was set at 4%. So it will not exceed 4%. The average across the state was 8.4%. And I want to just recognize our Human Resource Department. For those of you who don't know, we run a number of programs and events that promote health and wellness. Right now we're in, I'm going to call our bingo card phase, where everybody is sent out a bingo card, and if you do a series of activities and get bingo, you're able to send that back into HR and be entered into a raffle, and a lot of our local vendors do that. And it's, mindfulness pieces, it's yoga, it's walking, it's a host of different activities, and it's all geared to really change the mindset of employees for their health and wellness. And we started doing this about 4 or 5 years ago because the most significant thing you can try to do is change the curve on your healthcare rates. Try to reduce that curve. And the last few years, we're seeing some of those benefits staying in that, 3-4% increases and not getting those 8.4s and that. So I want to commend Kerry and Jen and all the ladies who promote the health and wellness, and even get the superintendent to participate once in a while. Our dental rate will go up 1.5%. When we did this original budget, we used 5% increase for the SAU health insurance, so that will represent a $2,700 savings, and I'll kind of touch upon that when we get back into the budget discussions.
Andy, I'm sorry, what was the number across the state that you said?
8.4.
Thank you.
In terms of our budget, I want to provide out another sheet, just kind of more of a summary sheet for folks to review, more of just the big picture, and I'll give that a second to circulate before we go into the budget. As the boards realize, the majority of our expenses are simply in salary and wages and benefits, because of the nature of what we do. We're payroll, we're HR, we're curriculum, so there are not a lot of equipment purchases and things of that nature. So the first piece we provided is the salary and wages. In FY23, there were $1,339,563. In FY24, they're $1,472,412, for a change of $132,849, or 9.9% change.
Does that FY '23 number assume the mid-year increases or not?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
The employee benefits, going from $594,979 to $618,356, which is a change of $23,377, or 3.9%. The bulk of that will be people that are eligible to go on health insurance that are making that change at the SAU. So we've had some people who have elected not to be on health insurance, and because of family situations and things, that is changing. Maintenance, $58,290 to $59,820, for $1,500, for 2.6%. And again, with the SAU budget, I really caution you to look at the dollars and not the percentages, because when $1,530 is a 2.6% increase, it kind of doesn't adjust always.
I apologize, I had to check, Tom, I have to look at so many spreadsheets. The FY23 number that Superintendent Corey's talking about with the 2107-176 budget for total, that is not including the total $52,000 salary increase from last May or December. That $2,107,176 budget is the voter-approved budget. Okay?
Thank you.
So
Sorry.
the contracted benefits, $45,844. They're going down to $42,669. That's because I'm actually going to try to use more vacation days at the
What?
board's request.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time so it's on the record, sir?
Yep, I'm gonna try to take vacation days. Please don't send the video to my wife. All right?
He's going to Vegas.
There we go. Services of $25,350 to $29,750, for $4,400 increase. The expendables from $16,500 to $17,100. The equipment software from $16,475 to a decrease of $15,450. And PD conference travel from $10,175 to $12,650, for an increase of $2,475. So from the voter-approved number, thank you, Linda, of $2,107,176 to the proposed number of $2,268,207 is a dollar change of $161,031, or 7.6%. Of that 161, 95% of it is contractual benefits and obligations, or $153,051. So the SAU doesn't have a lot of flexibility from a budget standpoint because it's mainly contractual obligations and benefits.
Where is the rent in that, which category does the rent go in?
Did you say rent?
It's a building rent.
The building rent,
Comes out of district expenses.
or is that not in this budget?
No, that is in the budget. That is in the, just, let me get to that spreadsheet,
Don't the
sorry.
districts pay for it?
Well,
We
we
pay
have billed
holidays.
it for it, we have billed for it, but I think it's in this budget.
But it's in the budget.
Yeah, I'll get to it.
Yep.
Go ahead and I'll let you know when I find it.
So I just wanted you to realize how much of the salary and benefits is really controlled by staff's contracts. And typically, the majority of staffs have contracts that talk about 2 to 4% for increases. Mine is tied to CPI. And as a result of that, we use the 3.5% increase to kind of put us a little bit on the high side. Typically, we use a 3% increase, but looking at what inflation is doing, we just felt it was more responsible to look at that.
And rent is in the maintenance category on this sheet you're looking at.
Andy, can I ask a quick question on the PD conferences travel line?
Yep.
Did we see a decrease in that, just historically speaking, during the COVID period of time? Because people were not going, and so this, I'm just trying to make sure that people aren't seeing this as a massive increase when I have a feeling that it dipped before, so it's almost, is it kind of evening out, or is this really truly an increase?
There's a couple factors. One piece is that those line items were underrun during COVID, but they've still existed. You see some increases based on just the increase of travel costs, because like last year with those folks who went on a conference far exceeded us, and we had to find the funds elsewhere to cover the cost of the travel. And another component is that as part of the Director of Technology's contract, there are obligations to make certain conferences available, and so that was slowly added into the budget over time. So that's one of the key components of that increase.
Perfect, thanks for outlining.
So moving into the actual budget, draft 3A, which has been reviewed by the SAU Budget Subcommittee and gone through a couple rounds. You see the breakdown that's in the packet of the superintendent's lines, the assistant superintendent for curriculum, the governing board. One thing that Linda reminded me of, because it would be in this meeting or the next meeting, if you want you to make any adjustments to governing board stipends, or even when you go back to your district meetings, district stipends, that's where that would go, okay? Because again, we are, again, below what many districts pay for stipends for board members. It really doesn't cover much. Many of you use it in ways to give back to the children that you serve, and others use it, it's simply used to cover the expenses of the meetings. I know some members in the past have used it to actually pay for their child care to be on the board. So it's not this huge sum of money, and I don't want people to think it is, but I do want the board to be aware that if we were going to look at that, or the district treasurer stipend during the next couple months, or at our December meeting would be the appropriate time. We go break down the student services. As you see, there is the new salary for the assistant director of student services at the $93,150 that we've talked about, and the remaining pieces of supports there. The out-of-district travel is going up. As the board may recall, we have 2 administrators that are going through a statewide program, so that will increase their licensing, as well as their capabilities of what roles they would be able to enroll in the future. So that is kind of to offset those sessions where they would be going to Concord. They are commuting together and saving where they can, but it's there. The Director of Technology, as you know, and I will say it, I think he's still in the room, he's sitting over there. For many, many years, our Director of Technology was a bargain rate. Rich did a tremendous job for us. In his recent retirement, when we went out to look at that, it was shocking where those positions had gone. So we are in the third year of a phased program to catch that individual up and make them competitive. Obviously, they're not getting what they would get in industry, but from a comparison of school districts, they are fairly compensated. You have the replacement computers in FY '24. We've reduced that down to 3,000 because, as you all know, Kelly has put us on a very regimented replacement cycle. So it is much easier to predict, and it's a rare occurrence where we unexpectedly have a machine that no longer is up to capabilities. You have the business office, the business administrator's salary, and all the people that work up in her office. On the next page, we have our salaries for our facilities director. I did want to share with you from the sheet we had passed out earlier, he is, I would say, undercompensated. I do want to give a real example of where he has basically paid his salary. Because many of you know we installed new tech boards across the SAU. There were approximately 45 boards installed. Historically, we would have paid a company to come in and pay about $2,000 per board. Lance and Ben, the director and his assistant, were able to install all of those across the SAU during their regular day, so when they were being compensated. So we see their knowledge and skill set all across the district. This summer, for the first time, I think Kelly and I would say that we had a easier summer because Lance was able to interact with so many of our vendors. You know, as you know, we had the Hollis project, the ventilation project at the high school, and we're still in the midst of the project at RMS, where we've completed 2 classrooms and now redoing the bottom floor. His daily interactions with those contractors and those folks have really made, to Brian's earlier point, taking some load off the SAU to be able to accomplish what the district needs. You have your maintenance pieces there. One of the pieces, obviously, you do see the jumps in utilities and heating oil, and that's all really kind of a roll of the dice. We don't know what the winter conditions are going to be, and we're about 18 months out from when this budget would go into effect. So Kelly does her best to provide those. And then we have the general category, which includes dues and membership, office equipment, copier leases, and the nuts and bolts to make us really work. So that takes us to our final page of the budget.
Andy, can I just ask a
Absolutely.
quick maintenance question? Sorry to
Sure.
interrupt. For those different contracts, like snow removal and landscaping, are those things that are multi-year contracts, or do you bid those out every year? How does that work?
They typically are bid for 2 or 3 years, depending on the district. And the pool of people bidding is getting smaller. So that's one of the things we're facing. It's no different than, like this winter, you may see more snow calls because there are less plow drivers. So when I first started, it took about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on the town, to do a full pass and get to everybody. Last year, that was added another half hour, 45 minutes, because they were down drivers. And we've already seen the articles from the state that people are not flocking to being plow drivers again. We're very fortunate, we have a local landscaping company, and as a result of it being local, we're one of their larger accounts, so I think we get pretty good service, so.
And did you see a lot of increases in their bids this year?
That contract was already in place, just like our transportation contract, so a lot of our contracts, we've been fortunate that we're not seeing significant spikes. Like I'll use the example of the bus company, kind of to commend them to this group. STA came in and we did an agreed upon contract, and they realized that our drivers were not going to be able to be compensated to other bus bonds very close to us. So this summer, as a company, they did the salary increase without increasing our contract, and I think it allowed us to retain our drivers, and that's been one of the issues, been a couple of little things, but nothing compared to when I talk to my colleagues in other districts regarding transportation. There are some districts where basically parents are waking up every morning and they go to Facebook to find out if their bus is gonna run that day, or if it's gonna be the first round, the second round. All the hourly positions, no matter what they are very difficult.
Thanks for the detail.
Going to the final page, we get into the number which, of 163,727. If I subtract the 2,700, which was the savings of the GMR from that, I come up with the increase I talked about earlier of $161.27. Of which, again, $153.51 is all salary and benefits. From a budget standpoint, as the board knows, we provide what we call the SAU budget that the board will vote on in December, as well as the adjusted budget to give the communities a choice. Right now, I believe we're approximately $5,000 above the adjusted budget. So this is a very lean budget. There's not many bells and whistles. I know things are expensive. I know salaries are expensive. I heard Brian's point regarding the salary issue. The only recommendation I would make there is for the board to put in, or increase the salary increases that we budget every year. We have that in, if you looked on the last page, we had $16,000, which if you had done your traditional increases of 2 or 3%, would have covered it. The problem is, we don't have a very large budget to go to, so when we make adjustments, we probably need to look at that line, because that would give the board the flexibility to potentially approve whatever salaries they want, but at the same time not have to dip into the unreserved fund balance. And at one point, the unreserved fund balance was running very high, and that was simply because we couldn't get people at the SAU. And we changed that trajectory, so we've been very stable with the unreserved fund balance of that 7 to 10%, and we prefer, and so does the SAU Budget Subcommittee, to use that for one-time expenses, because that is a much better rationale. But in terms of what went on with inflation, it was that explosion to all job markets and many companies taking action like we're doing at the district level by looking at what are some of the possibilities we can do for our hourly wage earners in Brookline and Hollis and in the co-op. So I gladly take any questions. And then the final page, excuse me, I had asked Linda to do it because in FY23 budget, we were $55,611,730 that we took care of as an SAU. It fell under the 4 boards, including this one. For a breakdown, the Brookline budget was $11,032,555 for 19.8% of that total. The Hollis budget was $15,573,557, which was 28% of that total. The co-op is $26,898,442, which represents 48.4% of that total. And the SAU was $2,107,176 for 3.8. From everything I've read over time, I think our percentage of our SAU budget is in line with overseeing a corporation the size that we are running. And I know some people have asked me the difference between Brookline and Hollis, and because we have everybody here tonight, people have to understand the majority of bonds that the Brookline school district has passed to upgrade their buildings is a big chunk of that money. And next year is really the first year that the Brookline bond kicks in, which will change that, that factor of their tax rate. And I'd be happy to take any questions, give you any thought process on the SAU Budget Committee, or happy to let people who are on that committee speak.
Tom?
Andy, I'm not sure how this is best answered. Salaries seem to be, salary and benefits seem to be the majority of the increases. We've heard comments made, not here tonight, but comments made about why does the SAU budget grow, and why is staffing grown over the years. I think staffing to me is pretty obvious in that we had a whole lot of things that just plain weren't being done. But CPI numbers don't reflect salary numbers at all. Do you have any feel for what statewide people are anticipating for salary and benefit increases in this budgeting season?
I think the easiest way to answer that is to talk more about what we're seeing from discussions external to Hollis Brookline, the co-op, for teacher contracts. And most of those discussions, when I'm talking with other superintendents, are beginning with a year one 5% plus a step, which is drastically increased over when we did a contract, say, 3 years ago. I saw today where the Social Security increase could approach 9%. Unheard of in the last
40 years.
yeah. So this is that balancing act, because to just put a number in there for salary means that we have to raise and appropriate that number if the budget passes. So that concerns me, because the board ultimately controls raises. I come in and make recommendations, but the board does that. And it's that catch-22 where you don't want to overinflate a budget, but at the same time, when you do go to an unreserved fund balance, then you are artificially decreasing the tax rate, and at some point, that has to be caught up. My first or second year here, we used $40,000 to offset the SAU budget. So the next year, what would have probably been a 3 or 4% increase in the SAU budget was 7 or 8, because you were making up that. So that is, I am in agreement with Brian about how we use the unreserved fund balance, but at the same time, it's the balancing act of how much do you want to put into a budget.
Thank you.
You know, the thing that we don't have at the SAU level, we learned this a few years ago with a situation that we had to address, is that we aren't a school district or a municipal agency. And the fund balance can't be returned to taxpayers the way it can through school districts. If we were to take Brian's recommendation, I respect his thinking enormously, to an extreme, to make it an absolute blockade against ever using the fund balance for this sort of thing, we would never be, it would put us in a situation of being able to accumulate money and not be able to return it to the taxpayer in any form. One of the sources of accumulation is unfilled positions. We can't take that money back to backfill them. We have a position we're trying to fill, and just, again, as a simplistic exercise, we have the money pooled from previously unspent because we couldn't find an individual to fill the job, and we would be artificially restricting ourselves from using the money we saved from that unspent position to spend on the new person we eventually hire. I've heard you say that you're hoping the employee market eases up in January, from your lips to God's ears. So There is a balancing act of using the unrestricted fund balance to fulfill some of this, because some of that money is for employees who we didn't spend it on, beyond our control.
And I think historically, I would say that the board has used the strategy mentioned by Brian of doing more of one-time bonuses than salaries. I think the concern was that dramatic shift in the salary market and how are we going to stay competitive? And if you just looked and did some research on what it's taking now to bring in new administrators, whether it's at the building level or the SAU level, the requirements are becoming greater every day. So therefore, the salaries, districts are attempting to keep pace, because the in and out revolving door will ultimately be much more costly than the appropriate compensation to have that long-term stability.
And I think, a retention bonus is nice, but what we're doing with this is making a commitment that they're going to continue to get that amount of money versus like, here's a one-time payment. I feel like it's just more genuine.
And I'm not sure that gets you to a point where you're actually retaining. You could actually put the bonus out there and it doesn't, people still leave.
Right.
Versus having a number that they can count on. And it is a balance, because typically I don't support doing salaries out of fund balance, because we know next year is going to make it even uglier. But this, I'm kind of conflicted here. I see the need, and I thought of the one-time bonus, but as I'm processing that idea as maybe a middle ground, I'm not sure dollar for dollar it gets us, it's equivalent. The outcome would be equivalent.
Because
So-
other places are paying the increased salary plus a bonus, and if all we're paying is the regular salary plus a bonus, we're not keeping up.
Yeah.
So, just, what is the retained fund balance? What crisis could you see it being used for in the SAU budget, other than salaries and bonus? I mean,
Historically, we used it for contractual services and service contracts on software. I believe we did a sizable expense several years
We
ago
bought
for
some
that.
capital equipment with it. We
Yeah.
did a computer upgrade with it. We've done.
Well, the
we've
rule
done-
we always had, we tried on the budget committee, is to say it was a one-time expense. It wasn't something
Yeah.
that was going to continue. And
It's a best
and we
practice.
talked about it at the SAU budget committee, and I agree with that. But we are in a situation where we are going to lose people, and we are probably going to have difficulty filling it if we keep at that rate. And then we're going to have the people that we already have working so hard, trying to take on that. Payroll has to happen. So what would happen is our business office would have to shift from working on the budgets and to doing payroll. I mean, that's what it would come down to.
Well, and it's a 2.1, this year's budget's a $2.1 million budget, but about 1.9 million of that is in salary and benefits. So I guess, for me, I feel like there's a crisis right now happening in our wages and what we're paying people and, retaining people. And so I understand that it needs to be used for crisis, but this is a crisis in its own way. What's happening in the employment market is certainly, none of us have seen that before, what we're seeing in terms of inflation and those kinds of things. I mean, there are lots of struggling folks out there who have to pay taxes, but I don't want our employees to be those struggling folks. So, especially those hourly wages.
I have a question about the mechanics of doing it. Am I correct that what you will be asking us to put forth is a lump sum expenditure to be used to fund mid-year salary increases? Is that correct?
Yes.
And what would, what would be the situation if the intended recipients of those increases move on, and you're faced with those vacancies? Would you then use that money to use that as the hiring salary?
Yes, I think we would have to, because I don't think, I'll give you an example. When you have people call the SAU right now for a para position or a kitchen position, the minute they hear it's not $15, they're going someplace else, because there are so many places that are $15. I mean, so most people right now are declining interviews unless it's going to be a wage that they feel is going to enhance their situation.
So my follow-on to that is, if you're looking for a chunk of money to allow you to remain completely staffed as needed for the rest of the year, is this enough?
I think the steps that the board took in May, with the 33,000 approximately, put all of the senior management in a very strong position. I think we're fairly compensated. I think the recent hires of the facilities and communications and compliance have allowed things to be dispersed. I'll give you an example that I think you'll all understand. Kelly Seeley is not here tonight because of the comfort level that she has with the work that Linda has done, my preparation for the budget, and this is somebody, since I've been here, has not missed a meeting. But it was one of those situations where I was like, you do not need to be there. So from a standpoint of, community, they have people who are committed. So I think your upper management is in good shape. I think if we don't do something for the hourly folks, they will look. I can tell you that we have had honest discussions with them, and some of them will still not be getting the same money they could have got if they left, but they do like our environment.
Is the structure of the proposed allocation of the money such that if you needed to use it to, say, hire outside services for someone who does leave, that money is available for that?
The money would be available for that, and then if we were to go to, say, a temp agency who may have a fee associated with it, and we didn't have the money in the SAU budget, then I would come back at this December meeting and make a recommendation to use unreserved fund balance for what I would call more of a contractual piece.
Thank you.
The problem right now, like you looking at the Assistant Director of Student Services, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we might have gone out to an agency. There's just no one. I mean, if you had to pick one position that you could probably almost name your price tag, it's a special ed administrator right now. And the balance of that is, we have people, we'll be losing an administrator to go back into the classroom because they don't want the few $1,000s extra for the extra level of stress and commitment and nights. So that's the other piece, because COVID has really caused people to reflect. And more, I think you're gonna see people less likely to chase the dollar and more likely to try to find an environment that they wanna be in.
Or take vacation?
Yeah.
Or take vacation.
Or take vacation, yeah. So I think this would set us up well. Linda and the business office have already compounded what those raises mean. So when we look at that 132 increase, that includes if we give the raise in December and then their raise. So when you look at the,
You've addressed what Brian has said we need to make sure we're covering.
right, but at the same time, it happens to be a decent year, because in some years that could have been a lot more expensive. But we're just fortunate in terms of the steps the board has taken over several years with staffing levels and compensation packages, have really solidified those pieces.
Thank you.
May I just put my 2 cents in there because I need to? I manage 4 people in the business office. They run payroll, they run accounts payable, they run accounts receivable. They make our 4 districts run. They pay our teachers. The one person is an administrator. She's the assistant business administrator. She left a job and has been approached by that employer no less than 4 times to name her price to come back. Name her price. And I'm not kidding. She's staying out of loyalty. She's staying because she likes the job, she likes where she works, but she is not paid enough. The 3 accounting specialists I have who run payroll, we have 1 in the hospital right now, so the other 2 are working like mad maniacs just to keep us afloat because we have no downtime in the business office. And personally, from a selfish perspective, I've been here 7 years, I love my job, but I have trained a dozen people, and as I said to the subcommittee and got a little emotional the other day, I'm tired. I'm tired. It takes me a year to train someone to do payroll. 1 year, because of all the unions, and it's a very manual process. We had 1 substitute who gave us a bad bank account this week. 1 substitute. We have to run an entire payroll because it's manual. Whether we pay 1 person or 200 teachers, it's the same number of steps. It's the same number of steps. So hours it takes her to run a payroll to get this substitute paid. And we do it. Because if you work for us, you're going to get paid. And we've never missed a payroll deadline. But we've never missed a payroll deadline because I have a great staff. So I'm imploring you, for my sake and for their sakes, and by the way, they don't know this conversation is happening. I have said nothing because I don't know what your decision will be. But I'm imploring you on their behalf because I want to keep them. And I want to stay sane.
We want that for you too.
Tom?
Is our superintendent's salary in the top 10 in the state? Roughly?
Yeah, I would say yes.
Is our business administrator's salary in the top 10 in the state?
I know it's top 25. It's tough to tell because you only have a year-old data.
I think from the funny thing, it's used every year because of retirements. So I'm unfortunately 9 years in and one of the longest serving superintendents in the state now. So there's that, and Kelly at 14 years in is probably maybe the senior business manager in the state now.
Right, but I'm interested in what she's being paid.
Yeah, I would say she's.
I know who she is.
Yeah. Yes, you know, she's fairly compensated. I couldn't give you the number, but I know she's fairly compensated because we actually did a study of the upper management. I'll say the critical people. When I say critical, I do, and again, not me, the position. So my position is funded that if the board decided to go in a different direction, or I did, you can get a quality individual who's going to want to come here. The same with Gina's position, the same with Kelly's position, and then the other one that there'll be an adjustment at once she finished her later coursework would be the position for student services.
But I didn't hear. I heard Kelly might be in the top 25. That doesn't please me. If that's
We don't have the data for the current year, Tom. The data that's put out is a year old, and we made adjustments. So it's possible, but we don't know what the other districts did. We made an attempt to get into that general range. I won't say, we didn't pick a specific number,
yeah. Well,
but we,
I had to come up with something.
but no, I understand. We're guessing. That's the problem. We don't know because the data is not published real time. It's a year. It's done with a 1 year lag.
All right.
But to give you an example, a district that I'm very familiar with could not find a business administrator, so they were able to talk their past administrator out of retirement, but that came in at $90 an hour. And that's what we're going to see, especially in the business management side. And the complexity of a multi-district SAU, to Linda's point, is unique, especially in terms of payroll, because you have different bargaining agreements, and I know some people have always asked, well, can't we just send payroll out? Well, if I cover for Gina during my prep period, I get $35. There's not a payroll company I know that's gonna do that. They're gonna make us do all the work, and then they'll send it over to them, and they'll be happy to write checks. But they're not gonna be able to do the calculations that need to be done based on how we have to function. And right now, thankfully, our unions do cover for each other and accept that stipend, because there are no substitutes.
I'm assuming that you're displeased because you want them to be in the top 10.
Oh, yeah. You didn't pick up on that?
Just clean and
Does
clear.
somebody have access to the internet? I can find it fast.
I guess my inflection
Just making
stinks.
sure. No, I was reading that. I just wanted to make sure,
Not everybody can read you,
I
Tom.
wanted everyone to read you.
Are there any other questions on the 2024 draft budget?
Yeah, I have one. Have we had any kind of outside service or a consultant or study done on our business management processes to see where there are maybe new systems or opportunities to lean out things so that people aren't feeling so taxed? I mean, we heard it from Brian, Linda just mentioned it, and when you're so in it, you don't have an outside perspective that can look at process and things like that. So in addition to paying, culture and improvements, I think, are a really valid thing too. And we're sitting on our 9.9% of retained fund balance. It just feels like that might be something to consider too, where there might be opportunities.
A good spend of that money.
Yeah.
We did, our last study, hiring a consultant was in 2015. And I would say it's a document that Kelly and I have gone to repeatedly, and we probably just finished the final recommendations in the last couple cycles, in terms of what we needed to do. But I think that would be a very solid use of funds, and I can get some proposals and bring it back in December for the SAU board to consider.
Okay, I think that would be great, and also give us someone up here instead of everyone being down in it. And maybe there's some new system or something that can really help with culture and climate too.
I like that, good suggestion.
Kelly?
The reception position that you're talking about, where does that fall in the hourly support staff or the administrator?
In terms of the budget,
Yeah. Like, I don't,
so that's the second to last page.
It's line 95.
Yeah, line 95.
It's the first one under general salary
Okay.
administrative assistant.
okay, so it's not on this salary analysis worksheet. Okay, sorry, that's what I was looking for.
No, because that position at that point was unfilled, and the rate we had to utilize was fair
Was
competition.
within budget.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thanks for being so thorough and explaining everything. I think it's really valuable for the people at this table and the taxpayers to hear.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the budget subcommittee. They do a great job. We have great discussions, and some of their suggestions allowed us to put the documents together that I think really kind of show it, because it is what it is, and getting the word out correctly is the most important piece. And we'll move forward with whatever funding is provided by the taxpayers.
Moving on to FY 2022 final report.
I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Oh, okay. Well, if I were a teacher, I'd say, everybody stand up and do jumping jacks. Holly especially wants to hear more numbers.
I love
Okay.
numbers.
All right, so we ended our fiscal year June 30th, and we had an audit in August. One of the reasons you don't hear these numbers until now is because we wait until the audit, when we get all the reports back. We had a very successful audit. We ended the year with $77,332 in savings, meaning budget money we did not spend. And back to Superintendent Corey's point, it was largely due to the 2 unfilled positions. We've had the Assistant Director of Student Services, partial year vacancy, and we had an accounting specialist partial year vacancy in FY '22, and then benefits tied to that vacancy, those vacancies. So, looking on the revenue side, we brought in $20,000 more than we budgeted, and that was almost $17,000 of that was just the return of surplus from Health Trust. Health Trust is our health and dental insurance company, and they return surplus sometimes unexpectedly from their risk pool. And then another additional $2,500 in grant money. So our actual bottom line to FY '22 is we had a net income of $92,898. And projecting the fund balance on the bottom of that page, you can see we started our fund balance at $167,487. Then adding our net income to that of the $92,000 brings us to the $260,385 ending fund balance, which is what we're starting our FY '23 with, that we've been talking about tonight. And by the way, that $260,000 as a percent of the expense budget in FY '22 was actually 13.3%, so higher than the targeted range of 7 to 10%. So that's the year end in a nutshell. Is there any questions on FY '22? If not, I'll keep going and go right into FY '23. These numbers are a snapshot just as of October 3rd. As we've talked about, we still have our unfilled Assistant Director of Student Services position in the Student Services line. That's showing a balance right now. And we did have an unfilled Office Manager. That's in the general line. And that person just started this week. And then benefits relating to those unfilled positions gives us a balance right now, estimating $22,000 not spending out of the budget in FY '23. And then looking down at the revenue side, really it's all about the salary increases we've been talking about. So if you look in revenue under the last line there, the use of the fund balance, that $52,125 incorporates the May increases that have already been approved and the $18,000 you're going to look at considering tonight. If we, as of right now, to get us to a $0 budget balance, we would only need to use $29,000 of that. Okay, so that would leave us a balance in that line of $22,000. So if you take so that gives us a zero net income or loss. And then fund balance projection starts with the $260,000. Then taking back out the $29,000 we wouldn't be using as of right now, if we don't need to, gives us a fund balance projection of $230,494, which puts us at 10.7% of the expense budget. Again, this is very early in the year, and we're at this point we mostly encumber all of our budget money because we don't know yet how much snow we're going to get or how much oil we're going to use in electric. So it's an early indication, but it's an early indication that I think is favorable to the bottom line. Are there any questions on FY '23? Or you're all zoned out by now, aren't you?
Okay.
Maybe go
22,
first.
29.
Thank you, Linda.
All right.
Thank you.
I thank you. All right, thanks.
All right, we already got the insurance update. So for Lynn Lake.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide the SAU board with a quick update. We are still planning to do the second floor bathroom. We had to delay that because we wanted to make sure that we had the new classrooms in Brookline and the work internally, both at the high school and the Hollis schools, completed. So the same company that is going to be doing our bathroom was a contractor, a major contractor on those projects. So it was really important that we didn't move forward. I do want to, again, put on the board radar, the facility, though adequate, still continues to need maintenance and address issues. It is under the ownership of the Hollis School District. And one of the things I just want to plant a seed, and it's not for this year, but it is down the road. Both of our communities are seeing a need for early childhood education. We have a mandate for 3 and 4-year-olds with challenges educationally. And those children, we have observed firsthand, early intervention is remarkable. And I think will lead to reduced costs over time as they go through our school system. Because many of those children that come into us at 3 and 4 years old are going to be staying with us until 21. So getting the programming in. So with that in mind, I would like the board just to kind of, just as a kind of that vision type of thing, to think about that SAU field that we have and some mechanism of where we look at potentially preschool that could be shared by the 2 towns, or some plot of land someplace that could share preschool, because that is going to become a significant expense. And that's because of the miracle of medicine. There are children that we have in our schools every day now that wouldn't be with us if it wasn't for everything that we're able to do with children at birth now. So those children are going to continue to arrive, so we should be looking at some place that is appropriately designed for their needs. And at the same time, it may give us an opportunity to look at a home for the SAU, because I can tell you, when I go into any of our buildings, and Gina will echo this, or any of our staff members who are in buildings, going in and spending time with those children reminds us why we do what we do, why we sit here on a rainy night and talk about budgets, because it translates into services for children that make a difference. And I had a funny story, for those of you who don't know, Bob Ouellette, our retired high school principal, is now a part-time administrator in the Brookline elementary schools. And he did a lot of work. He learned how to open juice boxes, doing some shoe tying. But most importantly, and he conveyed this to me, Bob has always seen that group of students almost as a finished product, and not the individuals he saw at our elementary school. And it's remarkable, remarkable work when you have a child whose parents are terrified. You know, this is their most precious possession, and it has an educational difficulty, and you're going to turn it over to somebody you really don't know. And there are a couple, of my favorites, because I get great high fives and hugs from them. But what you see is children who went from, this is overwhelming, to being first and second graders that walk around a building like they own the place. And that's the piece that, if more people could see that and understand those stories, because we do hear about the stories that make the paper where a child makes a poor choice. But they're children, they always make poor choices. And they do. All of us around the table could probably bring up one issue like, I can't believe I made it through that. I can't believe I survived that. I never got caught for that. But those are the ones that are talked about. But this district has dedicated so many resources to serving students of all capabilities. So we have unbelievable AP classes, but we have unbelievable self-contained programming to meet the needs of our most challenged learners. And I just think that that's the next place we have to look, because it would solve a potential SAU issue. It would give us services for students. It probably easily could become a revenue producer, because there are not a lot of districts who are able to offer services. So we would see people looking to come to us, and it would solve some space needs. Because one of the things that we face, and we talked about this at our last Hollis meeting, is, first grader and kindergarten are supposed to all be on the same level for immediate access to the outside. And buildings that were built in the 50s, that wasn't part of code. So as we try to expand buildings, it's not that easy because of steps and lack of handicap accessibility and things of that nature. So we do need to take a serious look at 4 Lund Lane. And I'm not talking for March, I'm not talking for a year from March. More of a global picture of where do we want to head, where do we want it to reside. And in some instances, we should potentially discuss, should that grade level, pre-K to kindergarten, be the same as our cooperative level, so it becomes a shared facility, because those expenses are some of the largest expenses we have. And if we were able to get something, property in the middle of the 2 communities, that would be an unbelievable service for our children. And I think it would be a great legacy for board members and administrators to leave, of how do we service those individuals. And those parents become some of our most loyal supporters, because they're not looking at math, science, English, and history. They're looking at, my child was able to get to the restroom, my child was able to address those issues, and my child was able to get back to a classroom. Because when you're sitting there at that first meeting with those families, they're not sure that's going to happen. And then you see them 13 years later walk across the graduation stage. And they're welcomed by their peers. Some of them become rock stars. They are celebrities. And we can't underestimate what we do for those children. And how do we continue to move them forward? And how do we create opportunities when they hit the high school or turn 21, that they can come back and work for us? Because this to them is a safe environment. This is an environment where they know the buildings, they know the people, and we have some of those success stories. But how do we go from those happened to that part of what we produced? Kelly, you had a question?
No, I think this is a great idea, and I heard you mention it, I think, at a Brookline meeting. I just want to make sure that we acknowledge that there's a group of students in the middle who are very invisible, and I think if we spoke with those parents, they might not agree that we're doing such a stellar job in special education with those students. I think there are many students who stand out and are visible, and being a pediatric nurse practitioner, I totally appreciate what advances have been made in neonatal medicine and heart disease, et cetera. But I know that it's not something that the SAU board can address or fix, but I just didn't feel like I could leave all your accolades standing in public without sharing that I'm hearing a lot of concern or divergent views from parents who have children who may have less visible disabilities or special education needs. And the lack of para-educators, especially in Brookline, is a contributing factor, I believe, to that. So I just wanted to make that comment.
No, I think it's very valid, and I think we have room for improvement everywhere. But at the same time, that's one of the pieces I think that would be my challenge to the board over the next couple of years is, what's our vision? We have a good product. We know we have concerns at places. We know we have room for growth in other places. But how do we move from spending so much time on the nuts and bolts to talking about what's the next vision? Because that's what our district has always been about in terms of where we're going. And I think if you went back 10 years ago, what we did for special ed took us to a different place. What we did in terms of AP classes and programming there. But like when we met with the co-op board, we have concerns that maybe not all of our students fall into those categories. So what type of curriculum or programming do we need to offer? But I think it's more, in some ways, Kelly, it needs to happen more at these discussions, because if Brookline does something in isolation, that's not going to be the student. And when we spent all that time on Portrait of a Graduate, it was about that child graduating. So as we move forward, if we can carve out some time to kind of talk about what is that vision, and representing with our 17 diverse personalities on the board and the administration, the multiple students that we need to service. And, what is, as I always say, the low-hanging fruit that we can start with to make improvements, because that's what people want to see. They understand our capabilities, they understand our limits, but at the same time, everybody always wants to see improvements.
Thank you.
Andy, circling back to the fact that this was a discussion about Lund Lane, or whatever it's called. I just want to,
You don't know by now?
no, to me, Lund is Lund Road, which is where BG is in Nashua. If you want to stabilize rather than destabilize the co-op, I think it's important that if we talk about any facilities construction that are going to be shared, Brookline's got to get some of it.
Yep. And I don't care where it resides.
Well, it just, this was done in the context of, is this what
Yeah.
we should be doing with 4 Lund Lane? And I think it's a great conversation, but I don't think it's a conversation for 4 Lund Lane.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, National Superintendent's Conference.
Yes, I just wanted to
Bye, Ryan, thank you.
update the board. If the board sees fit, it's my intent to attend that again this year. I went last year, and I just wanted to give you some pieces of, why I wanted to attend, because it's not cheap. It's being held in Texas. But the pieces, the focus, one of the big things is managing school safety.
Do you get issued a
and that's-
firearm if you go?
What?
Do you get issued a firearm if you go?
It might be a raffle item. I don't know.
And some boots and a hat.
Right. So that's one of the topics. And then there's a lot of talk in sessions about re-engineering learning. And one of the sessions is cultivating leaders. And our district is very fortunate that the vast majority of our leadership is younger when you look around at the other districts. But how do we encourage and cultivate those great teachers to be willing to take the next step? So I want to spend time doing that. There's also a couple sessions on rethinking senior year. And that's something I'd like to explore, because we have such a talented base of students, across the board, some whose passion is academic, some whose passion is CTE, or a variety. How do we rethink what we do senior year to address those kids? And I'll give you an example. There was a young man waiting for his ride to pick him up the other day, and he was a senior, and I asked him, what he was thinking about. And at first you could tell he was hesitating. And I said, well, what are you thinking about? He goes, well, I think I'd like to become a welder. And I think he was shocked by my response, because I was like, that's an amazing profession. It is a career. It's a talent that I don't have. But it was almost, we get too focused in on the academics sometimes, and we need to figure out ways to, how do we cultivate the kids who have other passions? And yes, we have CTE and those pieces, but even some of the things we're talking about don't fall into that. And then the one that I definitely will attend, it's called The Unfinished Leader. And I really like that, because it's about, the job is never done. And if you think the job is done, it's probably time for you to be done. And it's really...
Andy, your job is never going to end.
It's never going to end. So I really want to go because I think I can bring things back. I thought last year was beneficial, but at the same time, you know, it's tax dollars, it's Texas, and I just wanted to make sure that the board supported that, and also that the community was aware of that, you know? So that's,
Can assistant superintendents attend? Are they permitted?
yes, they absolutely are. We try, in all honesty, and this is just one of those things, we try to avoid having the two of us gone. Other superintendents have a greater comfort level, like yesterday Gina went to the law conference, I don't go. It's, you know, again, once we hit the summer months, if there was something of this magnitude, it wouldn't matter. It's just trying to make sure that
How
young
long
administrators-
is it?
It's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in February.
Well, you need to, you decide, but I don't think it's any surprise that, or you will be shocked to learn that you are embarking on what may be some of the latter stages of your time in this district, in this SAU.
Plenty of room to drop.
And
A new reminder.
the skills that you're discussing have long-term impact. It's not something, so I trust you as a mentor, as an educator, but I also would welcome the opportunity for potential future participants in our
Okay.
district to get exposure to that information and that community as well.
Yep. Point well taken.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. We added, as an agenda adjustment, under discussion, is the compensation committee. We put this committee together back in May of 2021, and it was composed, I think they met once or a couple times maybe, but really didn't fulfill the kind of what they stated, what they were planning to do. I will take full responsibility. I didn't follow up. I didn't make sure this was happening. And so I would like to just mention that we're going to continue working on that, and hopefully we can maybe get some feedback back in December. I mean, certainly it's not going to, we're not going to get enough feedback to have anything to do with the budget coming up, but just so we can have some relative information regarding our administrators. As Andy talked about, we're doing pretty well, but it would be really nice to have some concrete information. And so we will be asking this compensation committee, you know, with Andy kind of spearheading it, but we'll make sure it's put together. I think we have all the members. We just need to make sure that they're have time to get together via Zoom, via in person, whatever works for them. But I just wanted to remind everyone we're going to have that continue, and I take full responsibility for that not being completed up to now. So
Can I make a suggestion?
you can.
I thought Ken's suggestion was wonderful about getting an overview of the business office. If, with the board's permission, I'll get a couple quotes on maybe somebody externally coming in and looking at compensation, because my concern is this is not just SAU, this is your building leadership, and how do we maintain the young leaders that we have and continue to cultivate them, and then use that resource to come back to this compensation committee, because you know, in my discussions with Rob and Tom, historically, who have worked with me on things like this, that would give us the ability to get people to be able to look at potentially job descriptions and compare apples to apples, which is very difficult, because in some districts, the assistant superintendent is for the business office and not for curriculum, and things like that. So I think, you know, again, part of my goal was to get some information on services, and that might be something, again, that we look at the unreserved fund balance, because that'll also be a document that will give you more of a long-term roadmap, you know, so that if it is some glaring things, we've always done well in approaching it in chunks.
I think the conferences, this kind of analysis, those are perfect one-time exceptional expenses for the unassigned fund balance.
Absolutely.
Okay, so Andy, you would come back with a proposal for that
Yeah, I
consultant
think that'd
for
be
both?
best.
Okay.
So would that end up kind of superseding what the compensation committee needs to do, and so we can kind of dissolve?
Well,
Is
I
that what
don't
you're
think,
expecting?
I don't think it supersedes it. I think there's going to be pieces that the compensation committee is not going to have the time to do.
Becomes input to the committee.
Right.
That's- I
Exactly.
was just checking where,
Yes.
kind of the intention.
I would look
Yeah,
at it as,
So
right.
if I met with the committee and they said that it'd be really helpful to have A, B, and C, maybe I can find a consultant that can pull together A, B, and C.
Got it, thanks for clarifying.
I think a consultant has more access. I mean, I've done some of it, a lot of it is not there. It's really, like you said, the job description's different. Having somebody that specializes in that and knows where to pull the data from would be beneficial for us to have, for sure.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to deliberations. May I first get a motion to approve the superintendent's attendance at the 2023 National Conference? Source of funding is
Title II, correct? Title II.
Title II.
So moved.
Carol?
Second.
Who's second, Tom? Oh, Ken?
I'll take it.
Multiples.
Okay. Okay, any discussion? Tom?
Can we add in potential approval subject to superintendent agreement to allow the assistant superintendent to attend as well?
Are you gonna drive your children everywhere they need to go?
I'll drive them crazy if that's all they need.
Just drop the dog off.
Right, who gets the dog?
You know,
They like riding in the back of a truck?
I don't understand, are you suggesting that both of them go?
Yes.
So you want the motion to read so that we're approving Andy going and potentially the assistant superintendent?
The option,
If,
yeah.
with the option.
Either or both.
Right.
Do we
Okay.
even know what the cost of that is?
You would probably be looking at per person somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000 for flight, hotels, and incidentals.
And the fees and all that?
Correct.
So
And that would-
$2,000 a piece.
Yeah, the dues are covered by other areas of the budget, and that would come out of, just so people at home understand, Title II is earmarked for professional development. It's federal dollars that come in that have to be spent on professional development. So the Title II funds would cover the flight, the conference itself, but not food. It would cover hotel, but not food.
And then who watches over the hen house while the foxes are away?
Well, I think
Same people that if they were sick.
we get sick too.
Or on vacation. I'm hearing that.
I know. Yeah. We would welcome that motion and we would work.
Well,
to-
yeah, I think we can welcome it, but and can will you withdraw it?
Yes, I withdraw my motion.
Okay.
So I can.
So amending the motion by Carol Roy to approve the superintendent and/or assistant superintendent attendance at the National 2023 Conference. Source of funding is Title II.
So moved. Okay.
Carol, Ken, still
I'd love
second?
to second that again.
Okay. All
Does that
right.
make it a third?
Any other discussion about this motion?
Just
Okay.
a total agreement with what you said, and long-term, and maybe even look at other courses too. If we have two people, we can extend what else, broaden the aperture even.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, 13-0.
Sorry, Gina.
It's and/or, yeah.
Yeah, it is indoor. Gina's like,
I was gonna say, hopefully they're not gonna have angina until February, this whole thing.
Disney show, and/or.
I have a fence backyard.
The new Star Wars thing.
okay.
And/or.
To see what action the board will take regarding administration's recommendation regarding the unreserved fund balance, we need a motion to authorize the use of $52,125.
No, we already have approved that you did in May, you did the 33.
Okay,
It's 18.
so 18,000.
$18,318.18.
To authorize the use of $18,318 of the FY23 unassigned fund balance for the purpose of funding the compensation of the SAU staff.
So moved.
Carol, who else? Tammy?
Yeah.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I just want to point out $18,000 across the entire SAU is not hitting taxpayers very hard.
Does that wording allow you to use it for contracted services?
If the position became vacant, we could use it for contracted services.
Okay, I just
I
want to
think
make sure
what-
that you're not
Restricted.
restricted by the language of the
No,
motion.
I think what you're approving and what I wanted to make clear is where the money was allocated to. So if all of a sudden a person left, that portion of the salary with the approval tonight is what Gina and I have to fill that position.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I just would like to echo Brian Rader's comments earlier. I understand in this instance, but I do think from strategically long-term, I would propose we consider that in the future as well. Just because I get where he's coming from and being a tax-based funded piece, so that's all.
Just to Ken's point, the wording of the motion does not explicitly state how that compensation is deployed, I don't think. So there's still the opportunity with a positive vote to reconfigure the distribution if you see fit. Is that correct?
I think there is. I will tell the board my intent is to follow what I passed
Yeah,
out.
I understand.
Yep.
I want to say I really appreciate Linda's commentary and her advocating for the people that she works with. And I also want to acknowledge that I think we're in a really difficult place, and as a board member, I feel like my hands are tied. I feel like my duty to the taxpayers of Brookline are sort of in conflict, right? Because they vote for salaries, and then when we propose a new budget, what's going to be on the 24-25 or 23-24 budget is going to look different than what was on the previous budget. And so I do appreciate that. I mean, I am intending to vote yes, because I think that, especially for hourly salaries, these employees really sort of do the yeoman's work and need to be compensated. I just think as a board and as districts, we need to look long.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, 13-0, thank you. Okay, now we are going to get into everyone's favorite policy. But I'm going to start with a motion, and then we will discuss. So I would like a motion to amend CBI F1, evaluation of the superintendent long form in its entirety, by replacing it with the copy provided with the agenda, accept the first reading, waive the subsequent readings, and adopt as amended.
So moved.
Second. Carol? Who seconded? Rob?
Me.
Thank you. And
So what you'll see, the changes on this policy are mainly just housekeeping. You'll see the consistent title and header that we're trying to make consistent across all SAU policies, as well as some language regarding the instructions that is also on CBI F2 that we will look at in a minute.
Okay. Any discussion? Questions? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, 13-0, thank you. That is adopted. All right. Moving on. If I can get a motion to amend CBI F2, evaluation of the superintendent short form, in its entirety by replacing it with the copy provided with the agenda, accept the first reading, waive subsequent readings, and adopt as amended.
So moved.
Cheryl? Who was second? Rob? I have my reading glasses on, so I can't see.
So this one also is some housekeeping, adding the online implementation section that we previously was only on F1, as well as having the details of the scoring key the same as F1. The only substantive change to this policy is under the relationship with staff section. Number 2, facilitates two-way communication and interaction with staff. When we had the meeting last February to discuss the superintendent's evaluation, there was the consensus among the members at that time that we as board members don't have visibility on that item, and that we should potentially consider deleting it from this evaluation. The spec committee discussed that and agreed with that, and determined that that item can be addressed in the interviews that the spec committee performs with the SAU and administration as part of the evaluation process.
Is there any questions or discussion on that? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Okay, 13-0. Thank you. Okay. The next one is for policy BBBH, Organization and Operation of the SAU Governing Board. I need a motion to amend policy BBBH, Organization and Operation of the SAU Governing Board in its entirety by replacing it with the copy provided in the agenda, further amend to correct the date of the first reading to February 4th, 2020, and accept the second reading as amended motion.
So moved.
Cheryl? And Rob?
So we visited this policy back in February 2020. You may or may not remember that.
Something really big happened right after
I know, right. So at that point in time, we had a separate policy recommended by the NHSBA titled BBH/S, and there was a lot of conversation around those policies, and the board's recommendation was to combine those two policies together under BBBH, which is what you see before you. That first paragraph, those first few lines are the addition from that other policy that the NHSBA had recommended. Everything else in here you have seen before, and we also changed it consistently says SAU Governing Board throughout the document as well.
Is there
Can
any
you talk a little bit about the revised calculation of weighted voting?
I'm glad you, I was going to ask too.
Okay, yes. So we had some questions about this as well. So basically, this is a detailed calculation. The way this would ever come into play is that if we were taking a vote, a member of the board would request a weighted average calculation, which is based on the attendance, right? The average daily membership of the schools. And the board of the person that makes that motion then votes on whether or not they want to move forward with this weighting voting calculation. And if that passes, then we do that calculation based on the spreadsheet that Dawn provides us. And we did follow back up with Dawn and to make sure that the calculation that we are using includes all of these details provided for in the RSA, and she confirmed that for us.
So, but my point is that the additional wording, if I understand it correctly, it changes the rounding point.
trying to figure out what the impact is of that.
Balance of 8 or more students showing titles after the first year. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's straight from the RSA. The policy board can
So-
certainly,
so
committee
the-
can look into it, and I
So
don't,
it was an error before by the absence of that language?
no, I believe it was a change to the RSA.
Okay.
That's what we discussed.
Because it does change the math.
Right. But I don't think we've ever used that calculation, though. We've never,
I think we had one.
Really?
James O'Shea.
No, I thought he.
I think we did.
Okay. So this is for second reading only, not adopting. All those in favor? 13-0. Thank you.
Now, just understanding, the calculator, does the calculator currently work based on the existing policy or this new policy? Did Dawn say?
yes, we've always been following the updated RSA.
Well, not always, because you're saying it's a new RSA.
Well, I think since the RSA came into play, the calculator has been been used correctly, even if our policy wasn't
Caught up.
correct.
So we currently have a policy that we're not following, or in theory, we're not following. And the only thing, other than the language, that is functional about this is that one item. Why are we waiting to read it again?
So you're saying we should
You
adopt?
want to
this?
adopt?
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing something and it's in conflict to our current policy, and there's no other
Misalignment.
point of discussion in it, then
Yeah,
we should
we
make
should
our
adopt it.
policies
Okay.
actually.
Well, if there's nothing, it seemed to me, the first discussion point, that there were questions to follow up on. But if you guys are satisfied with the explanation that Amy gave, and you're ready to go to an adoption.
If this
I can adopt
now,
my
if this
motion.
now
Okay.
is
How do I do
what
this?
reflects
Right,
RSA.
we do make
It's not,
another
it's
motion.
not like we're gonna
Motion to
meet in a
adopt it,
month.
right?
Okay.
Motion to adopt, right.
All
I don't
right,
think you need
so,
to, right, just waive the third and adopt.
all right, I'm going to make another motion then.
But you can
I
ask
need-
for-
Withdraw, just.
Nope.
No.
You
'Cause
don't
we
need
already
to
voted.
Already voted, we just, but now we'll just waive the third.
But
and-
we
Right,
can-
waive the
So I
third.
can just
Makes sense,
move
perfect.
to approve
Yeah.
policy BBBH as revised and,
As accepted.
and presented and approved at first reading.
Second reading.
Second reading.
This is second
Yeah,
reading.
This was
and-
second reading.
second reading.
And waive the third.
And
if
waive the
that
And
third.
waive
happens.
the third.
Well, this would then be the third is what you're
No,
saying.
we
No, we
have to
can't
do
have
the
a third
second
right
reading.
Why not?
I don't know, can we? I think we could. Okay. Okay, then you're right.
Is it on the
So
floor?
can we move to adopt this policy
Yes.
and waive third reading as a separate motion, just separate?
Yes.
Yes.
You can do
Just
that.
that.
Okay, that's what we'll do.
Okay.
I mean, isn't that what you're suggesting, Tom?
He's
I
saying
don't
this is
know.
the third reading.
I'm wondering if this motion makes it a third reading.
Does it matter?
No,
it doesn't.
No,
Third reading
I
would be
just
a
think it
subsequent
makes it a
reading.
new
You just
motion.
read it.
Whatever you, let's adopt it.
Okay.
Oh my gosh,
we have
that
a
is so
second?
my
A motion by Tom.
There's
To-
no limit to the number of
ahead.
readings you can have for a policy. There's nothing magic about three. You can say the 27th
Okay.
reading.
We have a motion.
We have a motion.
Second.
Okay. Tom, I want to make sure that poor Dawn can get this. I want to make a motion, the motion from Tom is that we are going to adopt, waive the third reading of policy BBBH.
And adopt.
Right. And I have a motion by Tom, second by
Carol.
Carol. Okay,
It's on the floor?
it's on the floor.
So I have a question then. What, can we take out the language? Do we need this language, or are we gonna,
No,
we were out of compliance before, so I'm a little concerned that this could change again if we're, and I don't want, to Tom's point, I don't want to be out of compliance with the policy for a weighted voting. Do we need it?
It's
You have
per the
to-
RSA.
This is the
What they're
current
saying is
RSA.
that the-
Can we just
the
reference
calculation-
RSA?
Yeah, good point.
Oh, you mean change the
Oh,
language to say
reference
reference to current
Correct.
RSA?
And leave it
So
at
if the
that.
RSA changes.
So if that
we're current.
changes, Dawn changes, and we're not
I'm
out of
gonna vote
compliance.
against it. I like your idea better.
Yeah, I mean, if Don is keeping us compliant with
Why
our
don't we
spreadsheet.
withdraw?
Withdraw it and say.
Okay, I would withdraw the motion and request that we look at referencing RSA methodology for weighted voting.
So we'll take it back to the policy committee?
Correct.
Yes,
That's-
okay, okay, all right.
And then hopefully we'll be able to bring it back. for
Thank you,
our
Ken.
next
Good.
meeting here
Yeah.
in December.
So that last
Okay, so
motion
that was
was
done.
withdrawn.
Withdrawn. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry,
Did
Dawn.
not happen, just, yeah. Okay, hold on one second. I would like a motion to amend policy ECAF, audio and visual surveillance on school buses in its entirety,
Is that okay?
by replacing it with the copy provided in the agenda and accept as the second reading and adopt.
So moved.
Second, well, yes,
So moved?
just second reading.
moved.
Just second reading.
on this one,
Okay,
yep.
just second reading.
Yep.
Who moved it?
Carol.
Carol, second?
We did all the motions tonight.
Tammy.
Tammy, thank you. Okay,
So, yeah, we had looked at this one in February as well, and then in the meantime, it was updated by the NHSBA. So the changes that the board had suggested are there on the first page, adding the designee, specifying the clarification around how the, what a parent can request to have a viewing, a recording viewed. And then the changes on that second page around student records was added by as part of the NHSBA's most recent edit.
discussion, questions?
There's just a typo on item 4, viewing, the top of the next page, superintendent is misspelled.
Oh, yep. Goodness.
Thank you.
Can I ask a functional question? If I'm the parent who has a concern, looking at number 4, this bothered me, it's been bothering me for long, many years. At what point does the parent have the right to view this material? Let's say an incident did happen and the video the request was made. Well, actually, and never mind whether it did or didn't happen, because if I'm the parent and I assert something happened on the bus and I want the video viewed, and let's say these designated viewers say nothing happened, or it didn't happen, whatever it is, and how does the parent contest that if they don't agree?
The real example is, let's say you sat down with an administrator and they told you, I looked at the video, there's nothing there, blah, 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 and you disagree. You could appeal that to me. The information would be provided to me. I would then work with IT to make sure that all the children's faces were blurred out and this and that, just for privacy and confidentiality. I would welcome the parent in, we'd watch the video together, they'd be able to see what would happen, and case closed.
So.
This doesn't say that you can do
None
that.
of that is in here, and I really find that, it just, it's a glaring gap for me.
Would that be a procedure, not a policy? Would that be a
It falls under the student records portion of this, right? Section
Which
5.
is within each district.
Right.
So this policy is for school buses because the SAU holds the contract for
Right.
buses.
Right.
But then everything else falls under student records, which is done by the individual districts. So.
I feel like there
Interesting.
needs to, I know that it's referred, I recognize that, I see that, I read it, I understand. I just find it, it's a kind of a gap in the policy that, these policies are for us, but they're also mostly for families. And I feel like maybe there ought to be a line in there that says refer to policy X, even though I know it's listed elsewhere on the page. If you get what I'm getting at, I'm not.
I understand your concern, I just, I mean, when it goes back, the SAU does the bus contract, but everything reverts back to the district policy after that. So from our standpoint, the district policy is going to clarify that and kind of give us our next guide.
How about in a student handbook, can that be explained there? Does this end up in the student handbook?
The thing to keep in mind, if you look at 5, it says, in the event an audio or video recording is used, it may become part. But that,
Right.
by its language, suggests that if it's not used for discipline, so if you say nothing happened, it's not being used for discipline, it doesn't go into the student record.
That's correct.
And at that point, the parent will not have a chance to view it. So,
And then it gets overwritten is my concern. It's not like a paper document.
But if it.
but that's intentional.
But if, to Tom's point, if it's used for student discipline, it becomes part of the student's academic record.
No, I understand, I understand. So my concern is, my question is, there's a 10-day window before that piece of video is overwritten.
I mean, I don't think that's the case anymore, because we're dealing with an instance of something on video, and it's a 60-day window.
But my child says they were harmed by another child. And I believe my child. You look at the video and you say, that did not happen. I will never get a chance to view that
That's
video.
what I'm saying. And that's not, item number 3 says, after 10 days, it gets overwritten. I don't, so, I'm just concerned that there isn't room in the policy here for a parent to understand, or for us, I mean, you just said 60 days, and I'm not sure what
Well, it's
you're
just-
referencing.
That's the law,
The
Tammy.
But the
difference
policy
is,
says 10 days.
the difference is in, I may misspeak on the bus cameras versus our cameras.
Right.
Our cameras in the buildings are 60 days.
So would this be a good question for the policy committee to bring back to
Yes.
the attorney?
Do you understand the
You
question?
know, just a simple question to
Yeah.
see how to best
appreciate
protect
that.
families who have concerns and want access to video. Because I don't know if families can have access to,
I think it's intentional that they can't, but you can
right,
check that.
and is there a reason? And is there a legal reason why they can or a
Because they
legal
can see
reason?
other
why-
children whose privacy.
Right, I understand that. I'm saying if we get an attorney's take on it, it might,
So the scenario I have in my head is that another child, this happened to me, claimed that my child touched their backpack in the first grade. And there was no video back then. And so a brouhaha through email and personal stuff emerged, I won't say erupted, over my child touched that child's backpack. And if it wasn't just touching the backpack, I'm envisioning this become something much more significant. There could be liabilities that befall my child because the proof of the fact that my child didn't touch the other person's backpack has now been overwritten by this 10-day policy. So if there was some means of, like in my case, because I'm overprotective, I would like to have a policy that says, if there's any kind of accusation, allegation, whatever, that some other retention policy, practice can be put into place so that there's, because we know legal steps take a long time, weeks to play out, if not longer, and this doesn't seem adequate to me for contested.
yeah, I feel like it needs to go back to policy and
Yep.
see if it's even appropriate in the governing board policy, the questions you're asking, or whether, you know, it should just be referred to districts, and I think you can
Well, it has to
talk.
be with us because it's the buses.
Right, I understand that. I'm just saying, I think it probably would be great to weigh in with that, Jim.
Okay.
Yes, we will.
Yep.
That's
Gotcha.
what I would do.
We'll
So
do
this will be a second reading, and we'll bring
Right.
it back
Yep.
in December.
Yes.
All right,
So we
I'll-
weren't trying to adopt this tonight anyway,
No.
right?
No, it was
Okay.
second reading, right?
any other suggestions? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, second reading? Okay, 13-0, thank you. Okay. Before we get a readout by our process observer, because we're going to go into a non-public, I just want to mention, for our members and for the public that our next meetings are on December 15th, where we will have the budget hearing and be discussing the budget primarily, amongst other things, including policy. On February 16th, 2023, we will be discussing the superintendent evaluation, among other things. And then on May 23rd of 2023, we will primarily do our reorganization and then again, policies. So just
Could you
future.
say again what the
notes.
the date is for the next one, the December one?
It's 15th.
And that's going to be at Captain Douglas?
Yes,
That's the schedule.
thanks. That was a good point. Tom, would you like to give us a readout?
Sure. We got off to a really fast start because the hearing was uneventful. Discussion on the budget. Fortunately, there was a lot of good information and clarification. I wish the public was more engaged at this stage because I think this is when it's most useful. And I thank Brian for attending. And I appreciate the board's, or we should appreciate the board's careful consideration on schedule. We did really well. Deliberations went pretty much according to schedule. We were on track. Somebody gummed up the works on some of the policy stuff. I don't know who it was. But other than that, everything went real smoothly. Well done, well-run meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I need a motion that the board by roll call go into non-public session pursuant to 91-A:32 for compensation and/or reputation.
So moved.
Carol, and second,
Second.
Cindy. And roll call vote. Can we start with you, Tom?
Tom, aye.
Correct, aye. Cindy, aye.
Holly, aye.
Oh, Krista, aye.
Amy, aye.
Can I?
Karen, aye. Carol, Roy, aye.
Kelly, aye.
Tom, aye.
Rob, aye.
Tammy, aye.
Great, thank you. We are now in non-public. We will, upon non-public, make a motion to adjourn. We do need to take a 10-minute recess to get the microphones and everything down. Thank you.
10 minutes. Would you like to see if he's passed any place yet, Rob?